Are you worried about not having enough in retirement? You might be surprised. Most people actually need a whole lot less than they actually think. It is easy to overestimate the financial demands of life after work. But what if the reality is far more manageable than the headlines suggest? Could your retirement dreams be closer than you think? Let's discuss it and find out. That's 10 reasons why you need less than you think you do in retirement. So I know we all get caught up in what is the magic number. And every time we talk to a financial professional, don't get me wrong, I love financial professionals, but just keep in mind that their goal is to keep and manage your money as long as possible. Your goal is to let it grow as quickly as possible and retire as quickly as you can. But when we do retire, there are things that do affect the amount of money that we need. And the first thing I have noticed since I've retired is that my day-to-day expenses are actually a lot less than what all the financial projections will have you to believe. You know, you hear all this talk about you got to have the amount of money that you do when you retire, or 80% of that, or 70% of that. The truth is, when you do retire, a lot of things change. For example, with the day-to-day expenses, one of the first things I've noticed is the commuting cost is down. There's no longer a need for work attire. You know, you don't have to have that expensive suit, those nice shiny shoes. You don't have your daily lunches out like you used to. You can stay at home and eat a bologna sandwich or a bowl of cereal if you want. And I've just noticed that many of the routine expenses that I had during my working days have greatly diminished, and in some cases, a lot of cases actually just disappeared altogether. Another thing I've noticed, now I've not actually done this fully yet, but downsizing your lifestyle. You know, retirees often move to smaller homes. They may buy more efficient cars. They may get smaller cars because they don't have a need to haul as many people around. There's less people living in the household, which means their utility cost most likely has gone down. And they've probably liquidated or sold assets that are no longer needed that may have had money requirements associated with them. And I think work-related cost is one of the major ones. No longer have that when you retire. You know, you eliminate the cost of transportation, like we talked about a few minutes ago, professional memberships. You no longer have a need to do all the career development, travel to all the trainings and so forth that you might would have to have, and all the other stuff that may or may not necessarily be covered by your employer, but are somewhat required or expected to do your daily task and be presentable according to your employer's expectations. Healthcare coverage is another expense that can go down. I've not seen this yet because I'm not to the age of being able to utilize Medicare, but with Medicare and with Medicare supplements, plans help to overall cover the out-of-pocket medical expenses and often allow for a more predictable expectation as to what your healthcare cost may be. Another point is when Social Security and pensions kick in, that gives you guaranteed sources of income, and that can offset the amount of money that you must draw from your retirement savings. Factor that in as you do your cash flow analysis looking out into the future, because you may find that you can save a whole lot less and still have the amount of income that you desire. And by the time we get to retirement, we have a whole lot less debts that we are carrying around. Our mortgages, our cars, other types of debts that we have are typically paid off or close to being paid off, or if they're not, they're very low balances, and the payment requirements are extremely low compared to what you may have today before you go into retirement. And the next thing that reduces our cost is having fewer dependents at home. Grown children mean less financial support, and that's going to free up additional income that may have been currently being utilized for their benefit. This can include things like college, cars and transportation, their housing, other items that they need to be able to function, cell phones, whatever it may be. Those expenses will go down as you help your children transition into adulthood and transition into maintaining their own budgets and their own expenses. Another thing to consider is that travel and leisure is typically not as expensive as what you may have projected. I think a lot of times the financial professionals project out an excessive amount of travel. that when you actually retire, you find that you're not doing as much as what you thought. And in addition to that, being retired gives you flexibility of when you do these things. And it gives you the option to do them in an off-peak season, which allows you to do larger, more adventurous travel activities, but typically at a lot less cost. And simplified living. I think when we go into retirement, what we find is we find the joy of having a more simple life, less things to take care of, less things to focus on, and just be able to enjoy going out to eat a good dinner, going and visiting friends and family, and doing things that don't typically cost as much money as you do when you're younger. You're not living the same high lifestyle that you may have had during the time of your career. Next thing to consider is going to be unexpected savings. Discounts for seniors, reduced insurance premiums in some scenarios, and community programs that often lead to pleasant financial surprises. So as you're planning your financial future for retirement, or if you're fixing to go into retirement, or you're considering going into retirement, I'm not saying don't save as much as you have been. I'm not saying stop saving. What I'm simply saying is that the cost to live in retirement may not be as expensive as all your projections predict. I recommend you look into it, do a little bit more soul searching, get a better understanding as to how you may want to live your life, and you may find that you're ready to retire now versus later. And as always, seek the proper advice of your financial or legal professional, as today's information is for educational purposes only and will hopefully give you insight as to what the cost may be like when you retire. If today's video resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and hit that like button to push the content out to more viewers. And I appreciate you watching. I'm Mike, and I'll see you on the next episode.